For the first time since October 2016, President Trump will share the stage with a political opponent, Democratic presidential nominee and former Vice President Joe Biden. Here's a look at the stakes for tonight. About 3/4 of likely viewers, people who say they'll watch, are tuning in to see how their candidate does. Just 6% say they're watching because they're still deciding whom to vote for. 6% may not sound like a lot, but it can take less than that to flip a state. 13 states, plus Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, saw a margin smaller than 6% in the 2016 election. Together, they're worth 162 electoral votes, more than half the 270 needed to win the presidency. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Nikole Killion join me now. Caitlin is CBSN's political reporter. She is in Cleveland tonight. And Nikole is a CBS News correspondent covering all things out of Washington. Welcome to you both. All right, Caitlin, let me start with you. The number of persuadable voters may be relatively small, but how important are undecided voters at this moment in the campaign?
Right, that number of undecided voters is very small. We have fresh new polling out from CBS News that shows a vast majority of people that are going to be watching this debate tonight, likely voters. 73% say that they've already chosen a candidate and they're tuning in to see how that candidate does. About 41% are tuning in just for the entertainment value alone. About 8% are tuning in because they have nothing else to watch, so maybe they have exhausted all of the options on Netflix. And here's the key number, 6%. 6% of likely voters in our poll tonight say they are tuning in to figure out who they are going to vote for. So it's a very small margin, a very small number. We've been talking all day about, are there any of these persuadable voters left in an election that is increasingly becoming all about turning out your base? Who are these voters that are going to be tuning in tonight? Just 6% of them looking to see how Biden and Trump do against each other. We know, as we've been talking about also, that Democratic Party voters have been waiting for tonight this entire campaign, going all the way back to Iowa in 2019 when I was out there covering one of the first presidential events by Elizabeth Warren, who announced her candidacy. Voters even then were saying that the way that they were going to measure up these candidates running for the Democratic nomination was imagining them on a debate stage with Donald Trump. So tonight we'll see what their expectations are and if they paid off.
Yeah, I remember you telling us about that all those months ago. Well, Nikole, of course, one big difference about this election cycle is that voting is already underway. Close to 1.3 million people have already voted. In the battleground state of Wisconsin, they're already at a 10th of 2016 turnout. So how does that change the dynamic of the race and the debates?
Well, I think it does and it doesn't. I mean, that is a lot of people, but there's still a lot of people who haven't voted. And so whether someone is voting absentee, voting by mail, voting early in person, which we've seen that in a number of states, or just waiting until Election Day to cast their vote, voters make up their minds when they make up their minds. And while many have, there are still some out there that haven't. I've been traveling across a couple of states recently where I have encountered people who, few at least, who are still undecided. So to Caitlin's point, even if it is a relatively small number by our polling standards, certainly this presents an opportunity for voters to put these two candidates side by side and see how they match up against each other. And also, again, as Caitlin mentioned, certainly with the latest polling also showing that people just want to see how these candidates do. And I was struck by that number that some are just tuning in for the entertainment value of it all. But, the bottom line is certainly it will be a factor for some voters as far as their decision. To others, it may reinforce the decision they've already made.
Yeah. Well, we know that tonight's debate topics are broken up into 6 different segments as chosen by the moderator, each for about 15 minutes. Caitlin, in which topics do you see the candidates gaining an advantage?
Well, I think the focus on two topics that are top of mind for voters heading into this November election, the coronavirus pandemic and the economy. On the coronavirus pandemic, Joe Biden has shown in battleground states and nationally that he leads on that measure, that Americans by and large disapprove of the president's handling of coronavirus and are supporting Biden on that measure. But when it comes to the economy, that's been the silver lining for Donald Trump. He's been leading on the measure of the economy, trying to make that argument that the economy was good before the pandemic happened. So this is going to be an instance where you'll see the president on offense going after Joe Biden probably on the economy and raising questions about what Joe Biden would do and what he would have done differently on that measure. And then on coronavirus, this is where the Biden campaign really wants to focus tonight, making this race a referendum on the president's handling of the pandemic and also saying what he would have done differently if he were in charge. So those are two measures that are top of mind for voters and two issues that we'll see discussed at length in this debate.
Well, Nikole, we know the president and Joe Biden have each been preparing in different ways for this debate, and we've seen them both on the debate stage before, President Trump last in 2016 and Joe Biden as recently as March. How might they approach this debate?
Well, I think in one of two ways or a combination of both. I think if they stick to the script, I think you will hear, for instance, the president make the argument of, I've been doing more in 47 months than Joe Biden has in 47 years. That's been the argument he's been making most recently on the campaign trail. And so I think you will hear that thread through any number of topics, whether it is the pandemic, the economy, race, law and order, even with his Supreme Court nominee. So that's one possibility. And of course, Biden, the mantra he's been sounding as of late has been the Scranton versus Park Avenue approach. And so with the story that broke a couple of days ago on the president's taxes, this allows him to hammer that message home as well, that he's the one looking out for the little guy, the average worker out there, while the president has, kind of lived the high life his whole life. And so I think, again, you will hear the former vice president make that argument across all the topics tonight. If they go off script, all bets are off. I mean, I think that's really certainly one thing I'll be watching for, but I think what a lot of people will be watching for, especially those who said they're looking for the entertainment value here, how will the gloves come off? Will these guys go after each other? If you have followed the president and watched his campaign rallies, he can go in on Joe Biden. Joe Biden equally can hit back. And we even heard the vice president just tonight at a debate watch party saying that the president is going to bring the fight to Joe Biden tonight. So to the extent that this does become a knockout, drag-out fight, that is certainly something that I think many will be watching for as well. So on script, off script, we'll just have to see, or a combination of both, like I said.
Right, something like that. All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Nikole Killion, great to have you both. Thank you.